It's a video lesson for day 7 of our decimals unit. The day 7 learning target is I can add decimal numbers by converting to fraction form. So we're going to be looking at a couple strategies to be adding decimals to other decimals. So let's go ahead and get started. So this first strategy, I'm going to be showing a few examples of adding different decimals by converting each of the decimals to fraction form. So I'm going to start out with a pair of decimals here that's less than 1 whole and then move on to some mixed numbers. So the first problem here, we have 3/10, and we're going to be adding that to 57/100. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to convert each of these decimals into fraction form. So I know that 3/10 is equal to 3 over 10 written like this, and 57/100 is 57 over 100. Now, if you remember back to our fractions unit, we know that we can't add fractions together if their denominators don't match. So in this case, our denominators do not match. But what we can do is we can change one of these denominators. We can change the numerator and denominator of one of these fractions so that they match. And in this case, we can multiply the numerator and the denominator by 10. So we'll take 3/10. And we'll multiply the numerator by 10 and the denominator by 10. And then we're going to add that to 57/100. And what that does is that gives us 30/100 and 57/100. And so now we can add these two together. 30 plus 57 is 87. And that's going to be over hundredths because we're working with the hundredths as our unit. And now we can rewrite 87/100 as a decimal. So we'll have an 8 in the tenths place and a 7 in the hundredths place to get 87/100. So let's take a look at another example here where we are going to be, in this time, adding 6 and 8/10 and to 5 and 7/10. So just like before, our first step is going to be to rewrite this number as in fraction form. So these are actually going to be mixed numbers. So I start with 6 and 8/10. I'm going to be adding that to 5 and 7/10. And now that we have two mixed numbers, we're essentially going to use our same strategy for adding mixed numbers. I'm going to add my whole numbers together. 6 plus 5 equals 11. And then I'm going to add my fractions together, and that's going to be 15/10. And so I don't want to really deal with this improper fraction here, so I'm going to rewrite this improper fraction as a mixed number. So 15/10 is the same as 1 and 5/10. And now that I have 1 and 5/10, I can add that whole number to the 11. So I'm going to get 12 and 5/10. So now that I have this simplified down to its simplest form here, I can rewrite it as a decimal. So 12 and 5/10 written as a decimal will be 12 and 5/10, just like that. So let's take a look at one more example here. And this time we have different units for our mixed numbers. So the first number we have 3 and 5/10, so I'm going to go ahead and write that as a fraction. Then we have 2 and 49/100. I'm going to go ahead and add that, or rewrite that as a fraction. And so in this case we have two different units. So we have tenths and then we have hundredths. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite 3 and 5/10 in terms of hundredths. So I'm just going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by 10. So that will give me 50/100. And then I can rewrite 2 and 49/100. And this will allow me to go ahead and add the mixed numbers as I did in the previous problem. I'm going to add my whole numbers first. 2 plus 3 equals 5. And then I'm going to add my fractions next. 50 plus 49 is 99/100, because I'm working with the hundredths here. Now once I've done that, I can just combine the whole number and the fraction back together. And I get 5 and 99/100. And I can rewrite that as a decimal, 5 and 99/100. So that does it for solving addition problems by rewriting as fractions. But there's one more popular way that people add decimals together, and that's using the standard algorithm. So I'm going to go ahead and show how we do that with that same problem we just worked on the previous problem, 3 and 5/10 plus 2 and 49/100. So if you think back to the beginning of the year when we were adding using the standard algorithm, we needed to make sure that we were adding similar place values together. So we wanted to add our ones to our ones, tens to tens, hundreds to hundreds, and so on. When we're working with decimals, we're using that same concept. We want to be adding our ones to our ones, our tenths to our tenths, and our hundredths, which in this case there's none here, to our hundredths. So the trick we use to do this is we say we line up the decimal. If we line up the decimal of these two numbers, so if I do 3.5 and then 2.49, if we line up the decimal, just like I did right here, have the decimal points are in the same spot, we guarantee that our place values are going to be right on top of each other. So we have our ones place right on top of our ones place, our tenths place right on top of our tenths place, and in this case we have nothing in our hundredths place and our hundredths place down here. So if we set up our addition problem this way, we guarantee that we are going to have, we're going to be adding the correct place values to each other. Now in this problem we have 3 and 5/10, which does not have any hundredths in it. Whenever we have no hundredths or any nothing trailing behind our final decimal, we could always add a 0 to it and it doesn't change the value of the number. So now that I have my place values lined up, what I can do is I can simply add each of the place values and regroup as necessary. So 0 hundredths plus 9 hundredths equals 9 hundredths. 5 tenths plus 4 tenths equals 9 tenths. And 3 ones plus 2 ones equals 5 ones. So we also want to make sure that we bring down the decimal. It's going to stay in the exact same spot. It's going to split our ones place and our tenths place. So you can see that we get the same answer, 5 and 99 hundredths, as we did in this previous problem. Let's go ahead and try one more example using this problem. And we're going to do the problem, let's see, 4 and 2 tenths plus 2 and 97 hundredths. So once again, I'm going to line up the decimal. So I'm going to write my first number, 4 and 2 tenths, and then my second number, 2 and 97 hundredths. So you have the decimals are right on top of each other there. So that's what we want to do when we're lining up the decimal. And so now that I have my problem set up, I can add my 0 in here because that's not going to change the value of my first number. And now I can simply add, starting with the lowest place value first and moving my way up. So 0 hundredths plus 7 hundredths is 7 hundredths. 2 tenths plus 9 tenths is 11 tenths. So I'm going to regroup one of those into one whole and then the 1/10 remaining. I'll add my decimal point. Then I have one whole that I regrouped from the previous, from regrouping my tenths. Plus 4 is 5, plus 2 is 7, so I get 7 and 17 hundredths as my answer, 7 and 17 hundredths. So there you have it, 2 strategies for adding decimals, one which was converting the decimals to fractions and then adding, and then the second using the standard algorithm for adding decimals. So you should be able to solve any of the problems in the Day 7 problem set, but if you get stuck or need a refresher, you can always come back and rewatch any part of the video you need to. So good luck with the problem set, and thanks for watching.